Move!
More than 170 million credit and debit card numbers were stolen in what was once the largest financial data breach in U.S. history. But the most unbelievable part wasn't the staggering number of victims. According to federal prosecutors, the mastermind was a man who had once worked with the United States Secret Service. By day, he helped the government track down cyber criminals. By night, he allegedly ran a sophisticated hacking network that infiltrated the computer systems of major corporations and stole the financial data of hundreds of millions of customers. How did a man trusted by the U.S. government become one of the most dangerous cybercriminals in American history? Today, we're going back to where it all began to uncover the true story of Albert Gonzalez. If you enjoy true stories about system vulnerabilities, cybercrime, and some of the biggest criminal cases in U.S. history, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. To understand how Albert Gonzalez would eventually become one of the most notorious cybercriminals in American history, we need to go back to the beginning of his life. According to court records and investigative documents, Albert Gonzalez was born in 1981 in Miami, Florida, to a Cuban-American family. From an early age, he developed an unusual fascination with computers. While many children his age spent their free time playing outside, Albert preferred sitting in front of a computer for hours, trying to understand how machines and the internet worked. As he entered his teenage years, the internet was expanding rapidly across the United States. Albert quickly realized that behind websites and computer networks lay countless security vulnerabilities. At first, his interest was driven mainly by curiosity and the challenge of overcoming technical obstacles. But the deeper he ventured, the more he became immersed in the underground hacker community, a world where skilled intruders gathered online to exchange knowledge, discuss techniques, and share ways to bypass security systems. Over time, Albert became active on hacker forums. There, he not only learned increasingly sophisticated methods of compromising computer networks, but also met people who were making substantial amounts of money by selling stolen data. That marked a turning point in the way he viewed his skills. Instead of seeing hacking purely as an intellectual challenge, Albert began to recognize the enormous financial opportunities that came with the abilities he had developed. It was at that moment that Albert Gonzalez stepped onto the path that would eventually make him a name feared by banks, major retailers, and law enforcement agencies across the United States. In the early 2000s, the internet was expanding at an extraordinary pace. But behind the screens, an underground world was growing just as quickly, a place where hackers, fraudsters, and cybercriminals from around the globe could meet, trade stolen data, and conduct business without ever seeing one another face to face. Albert Gonzalez quickly found his place in that world. As his hacking skills became increasingly sophisticated, he joined Shadow Crew, one of the largest and most notorious cybercrime forums of its time. Thousands of members used the forum to buy and sell stolen credit card numbers, counterfeit identification documents, bank account information, and other forms of stolen personal data. Every piece of stolen information had a price. Thanks to his technical expertise and deep understanding of the hacker underground, Albert soon became a respected and influential member of the community. According to investigators, he was no longer simply a talented hacker fascinated by technology. He had become deeply involved in the operations of an organized cybercriminal network. But as Shadow Crew continued to grow, it also attracted the attention of U.S. law enforcement. The FBI, the United States Secret Service, and several other investigative agencies began secretly monitoring the forum for an extended period. Their goal was not only to arrest the people buying and selling stolen data, but also to identify the individuals responsible for running the entire criminal enterprise. Albert Gonzalez had no idea that while he and thousands of other Shadow Crew members believed they were safely hidden behind anonymous screen names, federal agents were quietly closing in, and before long, a coordinated law enforcement operation would change the course of Albert Gonzalez's life forever. In 2003, after months of covert investigation, U.S. law enforcement agencies launched a coordinated operation to dismantle the Shadow Crew network. Search warrants and arrest operations were carried out across multiple states, and many of the forum's key members were taken into custody. Albert Gonzalez was among them, facing multiple charges related to payment card fraud and participation in an organized cybercrime network. Albert understood that a conviction could mean spending years behind bars. But then, an unexpected opportunity appeared.
We know you accessed the server, so stop wasting our time. Where is the drive?
Loan. Give us the names, and we can start negotiating.
Instead of continuing to fight the charges, Albert agreed to cooperate with the United States Secret Service. He became a confidential informant, providing investigators with insight into the hacker underground, identifying other suspects, and explaining the methods cybercriminal organizations use to steal and profit from sensitive data. In return, federal prosecutors offered him leniency. To many observers, it appeared that Albert had chosen to leave his criminal past behind and start over. For a period of time, he worked alongside federal agents, assisting in a number of cybercrime investigations. Few could have imagined that the man sitting in meetings with law enforcement was allegedly hiding an enormous secret. According to federal prosecutors,
For this
even
guy
while cooperating
overlap
with
with
the
the
US
surveillance on the senator
Albert
right
Gonzalez
here.
never truly
They
abandoned
knew
the
each
world
other.
of cybercrime.
Look at these logs.
Instead, he was quietly
planning this for
preparing for a
months.
scheme far more
We need to
ambitious than
cross-reference-
anything he had attempted before. A scheme that would ultimately lead to what was, at the time, the largest financial data breach in American history. While continuing to appear before federal agents as a trusted confidential informant, Albert Gonzalez was, according to federal prosecutors, secretly assembling his own team of hackers. This time, his targets were no longer individual bank accounts or small-scale fraud operations. Instead, he set his sights on major retail chains and payment processing companies, organizations that store the financial information of tens of millions of customers. A successful breach of just one company's network could give his group access to millions of payment card records in a matter of weeks. To carry out the operation, Albert and his co-conspirators carefully studied the network architecture of their targets. According to court documents, they exploited vulnerabilities in web applications to gain unauthorized access, then installed malicious software designed to capture payment card data as transactions were being processed. Rather than stealing money immediately, they quietly collected the information and transferred it to servers under their control. What made the scheme especially dangerous was how silently it operated. Most of the victim companies had no idea their networks had been compromised. Thousands and eventually millions of transactions continued to flow through their systems every day, while customers' payment card data was being secretly copied and sent to the hackers. As the volume of stolen information grew, Albert realized he was sitting on what amounted to a fortune on the underground black market. But the more data he stole, the greater the risk of leaving behind evidence. All it would take was for a single company to notice something unusual, and the entire operation he had spent years building could begin to unravel. Even so, Albert chose to keep going. That decision marked the beginning of a series of cyber attacks that would send shockwaves across the United States. Albert Gonzalez's plan proved remarkably effective. According to court records, his group successfully breached the computer networks of several major American companies, including TJX Companies, Dave & Buster's, OfficeMax, Barnes & Noble, Sports Authority, and most notably Heartland Payment Systems, one of the largest payment processors in the United States at the time. Each successful intrusion followed the same pattern. Rather than destroying systems or demanding ransom, the group quietly copied customers' payment card data. Because the attacks were carried out so discreetly, many of the victim companies had no idea their networks had been compromised. In some cases, the breaches went undetected for months or even years. Meanwhile, the amount of stolen data continued to grow. Thousands of card numbers became millions. Eventually, investigators determined that more than 170 million credit and debit card numbers had been stolen, making it one of the largest financial data theft cases ever prosecuted in U.S. history. The consequences spread quickly. Banks were forced to monitor suspicious transactions, cancel potentially compromised cards, and issue millions of replacements to customers. Businesses faced hundreds of millions of dollars in costs related to forensic investigations, security upgrades, legal claims, and financial losses. Public confidence in electronic payment systems was also shaken. Yet as the volume of stolen data continued to increase, Albert Gonzalez allegedly became convinced that his operation was virtually flawless. He had successfully infiltrated some of America's largest corporations for an extended period and still had not been caught. But what Albert didn't know was that cybersecurity specialists, the FBI, and the United States Secret Service had already begun noticing unusual patterns across multiple states. Separate investigations were slowly being connected, and piece by piece, every trail was beginning to point toward the same man. As more and more companies reported massive data breaches, U.S. law enforcement agencies realized they were no longer dealing with isolated cyber attacks. The methods used to penetrate the networks, the techniques for stealing payment data, and the digital fingerprints left behind all shared striking similarities. The FBI, the United States Secret Service, and teams of digital forensic experts began working together. They collected system logs from the compromised companies, analyzed breached servers, and traced the path of the stolen data. Piece by piece, every new clue was added to a much larger puzzle. The investigation was anything but simple. Albert's group allegedly routed their operations through multiple intermediary servers, fake online identities, and infrastructure spread across several countries to conceal their tracks. Every time stolen data left a victim's network, it was routed through layer after layer of intermediate systems before eventually appearing on underground marketplaces. As a result, identifying the people behind the operation proved extremely difficult, but the deeper investigators dug, the more they noticed one startling detail. Multiple leads kept pointing back to someone they already knew: Albert Gonzalez. The same man who had once sat in meetings with the United States Secret Service, helping investigators understand how cybercriminals operated, was now emerging as a central figure in what had become the largest cybercrime investigation in American history. If their suspicions were correct, they were facing an adversary with exceptional hacking skills, someone who also understood exactly how federal investigations were conducted. That meant even the smallest mistake could give Albert enough time to erase evidence and disappear before agents had the chance to act. For that reason, investigators chose not to move in immediately. Instead, they quietly continued gathering evidence. They wanted to make certain that when the operation finally came to an end, Albert Gonzalez would have no credible way to deny his role in the conspiracy before a federal court. After months of covert surveillance and evidence gathering, federal investigators believed they finally had enough to make their move. Digital forensic evidence, server logs, and records connected to stolen payment card data had gradually come together to form a comprehensive chain of evidence. In 2008, Albert Gonzalez was arrested as part of a federal law enforcement operation. During the execution of search warrants, agents seized numerous computers, hard drives, and electronic storage devices believed to contain evidence related to the cyber attacks. Those devices would later become some of the most significant pieces of evidence in the investigation. As digital forensic experts examined the seized data, they uncovered multiple links connecting Albert to intrusions targeting several major corporations. According to federal prosecutors, the evidence indicated that Gonzalez was not merely a participant. He allegedly played a leading role in organizing and coordinating numerous large-scale attacks designed to steal payment card data. For investigators, this marked a turning point. The man they had once relied upon as a confidential source was now the primary suspect in one of the largest computer crime cases in American history. The case also raised troubling questions about how Albert had allegedly been able to continue committing cybercrimes during the period in which he had been cooperating with the U.S. government. Following his arrest, Gonzalez faced numerous federal charges, including conspiracy to hack computer systems, access device fraud, and the theft of financial data. The unprecedented scale of the case meant that both the investigation and the prosecution continued for an extended period. Federal prosecutors began preparing for what was expected to become one of the most closely watched cybercrime prosecutions in the United States. Following his arrest, Albert Gonzalez was prosecuted in multiple federal courts for a series of separate cybercrime cases. Federal prosecutors alleged that, over several years, he and his co-conspirators had carried out a coordinated campaign to infiltrate the computer systems of major corporations, steal payment card data, and profit by selling or otherwise exploiting the stolen information. The volume of evidence assembled by investigators was overwhelming. In addition to digital forensic evidence recovered from computers and servers, the electronic trail left behind by Gonzalez and his associates, including communications, stored files, and operational records, became key pieces of evidence presented by prosecutors. Faced with the growing weight of the evidence, Albert Gonzalez ultimately pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges. His guilty plea eliminated the need for a lengthy trial, but it did nothing to diminish the seriousness of the crimes. According to federal prosecutors, the case caused enormous financial losses for businesses and affected millions of customers across the United States. After each major data breach, banks were forced to replace compromised payment cards, increase fraud monitoring, and spend millions of dollars to protect customers from additional losses. The victimized companies also incurred hundreds of millions of dollars in expenses related to forensic investigations, security improvements, regulatory compliance, and to civil litigation. Throughout the legal proceedings, Gonzalez had little room to dispute his role. The evidence collected by investigators had come together to form a comprehensive picture, one that suggested this was not the impulsive act of a lone hacker, but a carefully planned operation carried out over several years with the goal of stealing payment card data on an unprecedented scale. Now only one step remained: the court's final judgment. And the sentence imposed on Albert Gonzalez will become a landmark moment in the history of the United States fight against cybercrime. In 2010, after Albert Gonzalez had pleaded guilty to multiple federal cybercrime charges, the U.S. federal court handed down its final sentence. The presiding judge described the case as one of the most serious cybercrime prosecutions ever brought before an American court at that time. The scale of the attacks, the number of victims, and the financial damage they caused far exceeded that of most previous computer crime cases. Albert Gonzalez was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. At the time, it was one of the longest prison sentences ever imposed on a cybercriminal in the United States. In determining the sentence, the court considered not only the theft of more than 170 million credit and debit card numbers, but also the lasting impact on businesses, financial institutions, and consumers. Millions of customers were forced to replace their credit and debit cards. Banks and financial institutions spent enormous sums investigating fraudulent transactions, reimbursing victims, strengthening security systems, and implementing additional fraud prevention measures. For Albert Gonzalez, everything effectively came to an end inside that courtroom. The man who had once been regarded as one of the underground hacking community's most skilled figures, and who had even been trusted by the United States Secret Service as a confidential informant, now faced 2 decades behind bars. The case also sent a clear message from the American justice system. Cybercriminals may never point a gun, rob a bank, or confront their victims face to face. But when their crimes cause damage on a massive scale, the punishment can be just as severe as that imposed in the most serious criminal cases. For the FBI, the United States Secret Service, and the investigators who had spent years pursuing the case, the sentence marked the conclusion of one of the most complex cybercrime investigations they had ever conducted. For the cybersecurity industry, however, it was only the beginning of a new era, one that would fundamentally change how companies, financial institutions, and government agencies approach digital security.
Congratulations, Doctor.
In the years following the Albert Gonzalez case, many cybersecurity experts concluded that it represented far more than a victory for law enforcement. IT was a wake-up call for every organization responsible for protecting customer data. Before these attacks, many companies believed that firewalls and basic security measures were enough to keep their networks safe. Albert Gonzalez and his associates proved otherwise. Their attacks demonstrated that a single overlooked vulnerability could allow attackers to remain inside a company's network for months or even years without being detected. In response to the breaches, banks, retailers, and payment processing companies across the United States invested billions of dollars in strengthening their cybersecurity defenses. Many organizations implemented real-time network monitoring, expanded the use of data encryption, adopted stricter security standards, and introduced regular vulnerability assessments to reduce the risk of future attacks. The investigation also changed the way American law enforcement approached cybercrime. Federal agencies increased their collaboration with digital forensic specialists, improved intelligence sharing between investigative organizations, and expanded international cooperation to track cybercriminal groups operating across national borders. For Albert Gonzalez, his name will forever be associated with one of the largest data theft cases in American history, armed with nothing more than computers, technical expertise, and the ability to exploit security weaknesses. He was able to affect the lives of hundreds of millions of people without ever firing a weapon. His story illustrates an important reality of the digital age. The most dangerous attacks do not always happen on city streets or during armed robberies. Sometimes they occur silently, behind computer screens. A few lines of malicious code or a single unpatched security flaw can cause hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. That is why the Albert Gonzalez case continues to be studied today by cybersecurity programs, digital forensic experts, and law enforcement agencies. IT is remembered not only as the case that ended the career of one of America's most notorious cybercriminals, but also as a turning point that reshaped how the United States protects the digital information of millions of people in the Internet age.